might be sharing this moment with us, and not only the people in the room, but people in the Kimberley. So I just want to start by introducing to you, first of all, Anne Martin, who's the director of the Jabal Centre. Anne is also one of the co-chairs of National NAIDOC Week. And with her is Ruth Abdullah, who's the Senior Indigenous Liaison Officer with KCLS in Kununurra. Ruth has recently been awarded an Order of Australia. So Anne and Ruth are going to make a welcome for us, and then I'll move us into the next section.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on whose lands we gather tonight, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I acknowledge their wisdom and leadership because it is their footprints in which we follow as we move forward in this generation. And I also, most importantly, pay my respects and tribute to those who have gone before us. I think of my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, as with all of our ancestors, and I'm very grateful for the journeys that they undertook and the lessons that we have learnt from them. I pay my deep respect to Ruth Abdullah, an inspiring voice for all, to our Vice-chancellor, Professor Brian Schmidt, Senator Dodson, our Dean of our Law School, Stephen Bottomley, and all those sharing this special launch, both here and across the Kimberley. It is fitting this launch should occur on this very special day, the International Day of the World's Indigenous People. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, so a very significant day. This partnership being launched today between the Kimberley Community Legal Service and our ANU will instil the importance of public service for our youth. It is an example of how the enthusiasm and commitment of clever, committed young people wishing to make a broader contribution can do this while enhancing their own legal skills and experience. And I'll now hand over to our wonderful Ruth.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and special guests. Oh, we're the special guests. We're guests of yours. I'm not a very good person to speak, but I'd just like to say I'm very honoured to be here with my colleagues and with Judy and the rest of the ANU to organise this partnership we have. Just a little bit about myself. I've been with KCLS since '88, so I'm an old hand. So we have an anniversary next year on the 30th, I think. Sorry, I've got this cold and Canberra cold. And yeah, I've been there 20 years. I still like it. We still do a lot of outreach work. I mean, we travel 700 k's in a week sometimes, so that's good for us. It's not like here, just up the road. It's very hard. But yeah, and we've got a really good office. We had 3 staff in the beginning, now we've got 14, and 2 offices. One in Broome and still in Kununurra. Oh, I've got to start coughing. I think that might be enough at this stage, and thank you very much again.
Thank you so much, Anne, and also Ruth. So you know that you're here for a special event, and the event is called Pindan, Peripheries and Power, First Nations Peoples, Civil Law and Justice in the Kimberley. So some of the things that you're going to hear tonight are about the absence, actually, of civil law plans and deficiencies in justice in the Kimberley, and what this collaboration hopefully will be able to achieve. I just want to acknowledge some of the people who are in the room and some of the people who are watching. So first of all, KCLS staff in both Kununurra and Broome. So that includes Senior Solicitor Hannah Levy in the Broome office and Senior Solicitor Carol Way in the Broome office. Also ANU interns, 3 currently in the Broome office, and Richard Brandon Baker, who is an ANU graduate admitted to legal practice about a month ago, who's working now as a solicitor also in the Broome office. I want to also note the people from Western Australia who are present with us, thanks to the National Association of Community Legal Centres conference being at the same time. But it is wonderful to have you with us, so I think that there are some people from Broome. Are you going to put your hand up for us? Please, yes. And I think that means that there are people from the National Network of Aboriginal Women's Legal Services or some similar name. Also from the Rural, Regional and Remote Legal Services Network. There's some people here from that group or legal services that fit into that category. Okay. Broome people, you might have to put your hands up a second time. I want to acknowledge the support that we've received from Professor Mick Dodson, the Director of the National Centre for Indigenous Studies, who's unable to be with us tonight, but also the presence of Dr. Diane Smith and some other staff associated with NCIS. I'd like to acknowledge Tom Allen, who's the chair of the KCLS ANU working group. He's in Greece rather than with us. Tom's now the rights manager at AATSIS. He's the former principal solicitor with KCLS, so he's based in Canberra and he's helped to create this initiative. He's also ANU alumni, so I hope you're getting a little bit of a picture of a web of relationships that are partly behind this collaboration. I want to acknowledge Karina Martin, who's right up the back over there, also from Western Australia. Karina is one of the people who originally helped to do the footwork to persuade government to fund a community legal service in the East Kimberley. Karina is the CEO of the Western Australian Aboriginal Family Law Service, which has got offices in Broome, Kununurra and other locations in Western Australia. Also Fiona Mason, who I think might be sitting next to her. So Fiona is with Matawatakura in Fitzroy Crossing in Western Australia. Fiona's the acting CEO and I understand that she's prospecting for a locum solicitor, desperately needs one. So if there's one in the room, Fiona sitting next to Karina is the person to talk to. I saw Gai Walker, who's the Managing Director of Scales. Where are you, Gai? Thank you, right up the back, who's been actively involved with Western Australian Community Legal Centres for many, many years. And sitting next to Gai is Naomi Brown, who was the first solicitor who worked for KCLS with Ruth when they had 2 staff and a half-time admin person. So we're quite a family in this room. So other people who are joining the celebration, you're amongst sort of some history, you're amongst a lot of people in Western Australia who care about what's happening here and care about this initiative. So I'm now going to invite the Vice-chancellor, Professor Brian Schmidt, to make some remarks, and followed by our Dean, Professor Stephen Bottomley. And then we're going to move into a panel, and you can see the names of the panellists and you know who the panellists are, but as they're moving into position, I'll introduce them. So, Vice-chancellor, would you like to?
Thank you, one and all, and thank you, Auntie Anne, for once again being a shining light at this university, and your acknowledgement of country, which I share with your sentiments. To the visitors from Broome coming in, or from the West coming in via video, welcome. To the students, so I see around here, to the staff, and of course we've heard of the many people who have come a long ways from the West to be with us today. Welcome to ANU. I also particularly want to thank Ruth, for your kind words, and congratulations on your Order of Australia. And Senator Dodson, it's great to have you back, even if we still don't have you on council, which I mourn. It is still great to have you back here. We are fortunate here at ANU to be guardians of one of Australia's and indeed one of the world's great campuses that we have been able to collect our thoughts and start to celebrate the Indigenous heritage that goes back more than 20,000 years. And so if you have not had a chance, I encourage you to go and have a walk through the campus and explore its Indigenous history. And there's a way path to help guide your way. In the beginning, I think of many things that we're going to be doing over the months and years ahead. Now, universities are a place we like to think are innovative, but innovation comes in a variety of sense, and it means going out and trying to do things in new ways, and potentially failing, but often getting things right. And I'm always impressed when I look around the university at the clever ways that people have at doing new things. Today, we are here to celebrate one of those new ideas, this collaboration between the Kimberley Community Legal Service and the ANU College of Law in a new way. We can see that we are deeply linked through history and people, but as Australia's national university, we need to go out and think beyond the current way of doing things, and I think set a standard which people will pay tribute and compliment to by emulating. So, over the past 7 decades, we have contributed somewhat to the advance of Australia's Indigenous peoples, but we need to do more. And so I am looking for these innovative ideas like we celebrate tonight in doing that. The ANU is doing a number of things to support this ideal. We are undertaking a comprehensive review of our reconciliation action plan. We had a very good reconciliation action plan done in 2009, but we didn't action it as well as we might have. And so I am trying to make sure that we come up with an even better plan, but then we put the action in that plan. And that's something I am really looking forward to. We are also thinking about how we can contribute to what is the ongoing reconciliation of Australia and its Indigenous peoples. And that's something I remain open to ideas to. So I encourage you, maybe things will emerge today. Feel free to email me. I am all ears. So I congratulate everyone involved in this new collaboration. I think it is just the type of thing that helps both our students advance, helps create the relationships that will endure, and I think it serves as an exemplar for the rest of the nation to go out and join together to make this country truly a better place. And it's a lot of work on many people. You've heard many of the people there, but please allow me to also congratulate and thank each and every one of you. And I'll hand back then for those notes.
Thank you, Vice-chancellor. And I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land which we're gathered this evening, and I pay my respects on behalf of the ANU College of Law to their elders past, present and emerging. I often stand in this room at the beginning of each academic year and remind our incoming students that the ANU College of Law measures its time here in mere decades. We're nudging towards 60 years. And so it's entirely appropriate that we acknowledge the custodianship of people who measure their connection with this land in thousands of years. As Dean of the College, I extend a very warm welcome, and particularly for those of you from the northwestern part of the continent, a especially warm welcome to the ANU College of Law as we gather here tonight to celebrate the creation of this really wonderful opportunity for our students. A key message in our legal education programs here in the college is that students should always be looking for ways to seize opportunities, to use their skills, to use their learning, to give back to society, to strive to make a difference in the world. And our student-led law reform and social justice program is really, I think, a sector-leading example of how that message translates into practice. But it also means that it's incumbent upon us as legal educators to do what we can to make those opportunities happen. And this partnership that we're celebrating tonight with the Kimberley Community Legal Service is just a wonderful example of how that can happen. I want to thank everyone who has made this possible, particularly our colleagues from the KCLS. Thank you so much. Thank you to colleagues from within the college and also from across the university, those who've already been listed and mentioned by Judy. And speaking of Judy, I do actually want to note the drive and vision of Judy Harrison in making this happen. Thank you. And finally, and equally especially, thank you to our students. Thank you to the students who have been involved in establishing this initiative and who are now participating as interns. This initiative works because of your commitment. You make the ANU College of Law, Australia's national law school, a terrific place in which to be a member of the broader legal community. So thank you. And I'll now hand over back to Judy for the main act.
So the main act is about to happen here, but before the main act happens, I just want to tell you that on my count there are 46 students that have been involved in this initiative since it started in April. And I'd like the students who have been involved, who are present now, to actually stand up so that people can see who you are. Is that too much to ask, to actually stand up? I think maybe, yeah. Okay, thank you, you've done it. I won't talk about the significant things that the students have done. I think other people will touch on some of that. But I do want to just say that before this initiative, the Broome office of KCLS had never had a law student volunteering or being an intern. So there's a world of difference between a place like Canberra, where we have this fantastic law school and so many law students who are willing to participate and do so not only in Canberra but in other places. But in places like Broome, it's not like that. And so in places like the Kimberley, there's a shortage of help that can come sometimes from law students. So I'd now like to ask the people who are on the panel, it's actually a bit misnamed, it's not really a panel, but they're going to sit here as if they're a panel to sort of move into position, and I'll help to actually position you. So Senator Dodson, you're here, and Professor Rubenstein, you're here, and Professor Wood, where are you? You're here. Yes. And Professor Janet Hunt, and also Suresh Razi, who's the Principal Solicitor of the Kimberley Community Legal Service. I understand that the Vice-chancellor may have to leave us. Oh, right now. All right. Thank you so much for being with us. So our panellists are going to speak for about 5 minutes each, and they're in the order in which they are going to speak to kind of make it easy for them. And what they're going to speak about has relevance to the background to the relationship, so including the context in the Kimberley. So, yes, Senator Dodson.
Thank you very much, and I acknowledge the Ngambri people and on whose lands we are gathered, and I thank Anne and others for the welcome. And I express my appreciation to the law school for their response to this great initiative, but also to the Kimberley Community Legal Service for its endeavours to get such a relationship into place. So it's not always easy to do that. I get a bit spoilt these days. I can go to the Parliamentary Library and someone will give me a paper very quickly on any matter that I so desire. I mean, a fantastic opportunity. That's not the case for the lawyers out in the field, unfortunately. And they have to drive miles looking for clients. They then frustrated because the clients aren't there sometimes. And they've got to make an appearance, they've got to convince someone that the tenancy matter that is before the magistrate or whomever needs to be held over because, you know, someone isn't there to give them instructions. So the complexity of the civil law, that someone at the coalface of dealing with the ramifications of demands and interest and just to deal with the practicality of what the question is or what the issue is in a very narrow sense is very demanding of practitioners in the field, let alone to do any research on how to improve the law or how to assist people deal with all the concerns that they bring to them on a daily basis. And that can be from questions outside of their competence. Constitutional matters, there's a whole, as you know, there's a whole debate going on in the nation amongst Indigenous peoples about constitutional recognition, about entrenchment or non-entrenchment, about sovereignty or not sovereignty, about treaty or no treaties, about truth-telling. How do you deal with any of this stuff and uphold those particular tenets of the Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights? You know, free, prior and informed consent. You've got someone running around saying, let's entrench this voice. Well, how does that foreclose upon the rights of an individual Indigenous person who's never heard of the proposition? So, just in one little field, and the lawyers in the field, and I acknowledge the people in Broome because I know them most, and I've been to the crammed little space they've got that they have to work in, and they had no reception. There's no one to take a phone call. And so these people who are very well qualified have to take phone calls, they have to take people just walking in off the street and wanting their attention on a matter that you know, may have even passed the dateline of the court's demands. And obviously magistrates aren't always tolerant about people who don't meet their deadlines. They think that you should. But let me say what a great initiative it is to build a relationship with a university, a national university. This is the national university. This is not any other university. It has a national, I would think, an obligation, a responsibility. And I know from my time here, and again being reinforced by the Vice-chancellor, of the desire to bring the talent, to bring the skills, to expose students to the real challenges in practical terms for students. I mean, and I'm not suggesting the students don't get that, but you can have a court, a mid-court in some settings here, but when you actually have to drive 300 k's to try and find a client, and you've got 10 minutes before the magistrate says, well, you failed your client, and you've done your best to find the client, it's very hard. But there are also, as I said, there are aspects of the civil law that people don't get an opportunity to fully understand or even to be appraised of the changes. To be appraised of the changes in rulings, in developments in the law, in where the law may be going in a particular field. So for their own legal upgrades or competencies, there are many things about that where it's very important to have someone at the other end of the phone who can say, well, I've done research in this field, these are the seminal cases that have been, the most latest ones, and these are the website connections that you could go to and download this matter. Otherwise, they've got to find time to do that themselves, but to be spoon-fed sometimes at the end of a long day or end of a long week is a great opportunity. And again, I can only relate it to my privileged position in the Senate, where I can go to the Parliamentary Library and ask for information, opinion, a view, a record, history, proposals. One particular matter that I must say, I've asked the Parliamentary Library for, well, what's the best way you can not entrench, but how can you legislate for an Indigenous voice, not to entrench it, but to legislate for it, that would make it better than the ATSIC proposition? Okay, now if I went and asked the lawyers working in the field, they might be able to tell me if they had the time, the space, they'd be willing to try and help me, but they don't have that time, they don't have that space, and they don't have the opportunity. But if they could ask someone at the law school, how could you do this? Would you improve its functionality by taking, powers from the Social Justice Commissioner and incorporating that under an entity, or taking those from the native title entity? How would you bring these things together? And would you, strengthen our legal system if the ILO Convention 169 was entrenched in some way? So they don't have time to do that. Much and all as they'd love to. They would really love to be able to be abreast of. These are lawyers. These are people who have nurtured themselves through the thirst for the law, who don't get a chance to actually enjoy that aspect of it. They're at the cut and thrust of someone else's need. And if they fail, that someone else is either going to jail, or they're going to have a big bill that they're going to have to pay off, and they're going to feel terribly bad about the lack of ability to have done something to relieve that burden. So this is a great initiative. Have no doubts about it. And all of those of you who've been involved in this, in some way, shape or form as students, it has probably enhanced your capacities. When you finish, or when you're on your leave, come to the Kimberley, sit down and work with those lawyers, go on those trips, meet these people that are struggling every day of the week to understand why the law behaves as the law does behave. Because I've no idea why it does such stupid things sometimes. But you would be exposed then to the social value systems that you might have in your own head, but you'd find that those social value systems, as you butt up against the practicality of Indigenous peoples, Aboriginal peoples living in these communities with their own languages, with their own customary priorities, and with their own demands, that it's not always easy to match the two things together. So I'm really appreciative of this initiative. I congratulate all involved, and I encourage any student that's a bit hesitant about getting involved in here because you think it may be beyond your depth. Well, think of the poor old barrister or lawyer out there who is every day of the week getting into something that is taking them out into the deep water, and sometimes there's holes in that boat that they're rowing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I might just interpose before Kim speaks that what the students are actually achieving is, in part, they're manning a hot desk here at the law school, which is running from 9 until 5 days a week. And they're doing that by running in 2 shifts a day, 3 students in each shift, so there's 30 students or 30 spots available each week. So that's part of what we're talking about. So when Senator Dodson is talking about busy lawyers in the Kimberley who can't get stuff done, that part of the initiative is trying to deliver the kind of support that they can't receive on site. Lack of law schools in the Kimberley, solution, hot desk at the ANU. All right, so Kim.
So thank you very much, Judy. So I'm Kim Rubenstein, and I'm really sitting here, I think primarily because I'm chair of the ANU College of Law's Reconciliation and Action Plan Committee. And I'd like to first of all acknowledge, in addition to acknowledging the traditional owners, to acknowledge my colleagues in that committee who have been working with me to ensure that this type of event has happened, to acknowledge Judy for her energy and effort in ensuring that this marking of significant work is occurring tonight, to my colleague, Associate Professor Asmi Wood, to our student member of the committee, Braden Edwards, who is here in the audience as well as our executive members, Peter Spender, and our Dean, Stephen Bottomley, and Mary Spears, who is not here this evening, but who is also an energetic member of our committee. This committee, I think, is quite remarkable. The Vice-chancellor referred to the 2009 Action Plan Committee, Action Plan, the ANU's RAP. I think, and I might be broadening the college's shoulders here, but I think our college has been one of the most active colleges in relation to a commitment to that RAP. And we have been working energetically, and I'd also actually like to acknowledge my predecessor, Associate Professor Tony Connolly, who was one of the earlier chairs of that committee, because when I came to the committee to take over this role, I was overwhelmed by the action of the committee. And the action of the committee really fits within the overall commitments of the university and to the college in terms of research, education and broader service to the community. So in addition to an initiative like this, where we see students on the ground, we also have had a remarkable initiative in terms of reflections on our education program, on our teaching of our core legal subjects, to interrogate and critique how much it is our curriculum is actually engaging with Indigenous issues, but also critiquing the ways in which we value law as an institution and the impact of law on different groups within society, primarily, of course, in terms of the impact on Indigenous Australians. And I think that that is really fundamental and something to acknowledge, that this law school, in its own education, is critiquing and thinking about reconciliation in very real terms, in terms of the way we educate our lawyers. So there is this practical experience which sees the law in action, but I think that we should also be acknowledging at an event like this how we are trying to totally imbue our education with a recognition of Indigenous Australia and our responsibilities in terms of law as an expression of power in society, and the way we need to continually interrogate that exercise of power. So I think our committee is affirmed by an event like this. The second part of what I wanted to address is that sort of thinking fits into my own scholarship in terms of questions of citizenship. And there are various people in this room who have participated with me in my courses, in my teaching, in thinking about citizenship both as a legal status, who are our citizens in the community, and there are very significant issues about legal status that I'll mention in a second in relation to Indigenous Australians. There's citizenship as a legal status, but there's also citizenship in terms of rights, of our conception of rights that are associated with citizenship. There's the notion of citizenship as political participation. And finally, the scholarship also looks at citizenship in terms of identity. And I think each of those four areas are fundamental both to Indigenous Australians, but also to this project. So in terms of legal status, Indigenous Australians are the perfect example of showing how status does not guarantee the rights, the second point that I'm making. Indigenous Australians were British subjects right from the start. They became Australian citizens on the 26th of January 1949, when the term started, but they were not accorded the rights that we think of as citizenship rights. Now, there's another whole lecture in terms of what the citizenship rights actually mean in terms of our constitution, but the Indigenous Australians experience is a reminder that status does not guarantee rights. It problematises the status and makes us think, should the status signify rights? But that doesn't always. So voting, for instance, was not a right of Indigenous Australians until 1962. Freedom of movement within the country, things that we think of as fundamental to citizenship, were not possessed by Indigenous Australians. Political participation is another expression of that. And identity is so fundamental to a notion of citizenship, yet the state has played around with Indigenous notions of identity, and rightfully Indigenous Australians have critiqued and contested the power of the state to impose Australian citizenship in the way that the state has. Now, the links to this project are, I think, fundamentally about law as a tool for active citizenship. One of the educational purposes that I hope as a teacher that I can convey to students is that law can be using our skills as lawyers can be one of the most empowering in terms of being an active citizen, of being able to engage in the public sphere and use the tools to critique, to challenge and to question the exercise of power in society. So I hope that all of our students who are having this amazing opportunity to work on the ground with Indigenous Australians and issues that are so fundamental to Indigenous Australians will be reminded that these tools that you are working on and developing are going to be so fundamental to the way that you can contribute as active citizens in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I should just mention that Anthony was also a solicitor at the Western Australian Aboriginal Legal Service before he found academia. Yes. And I might also just mention that in relation to citizenship, so in 2012 when I was doing some work at KCLS in relation to the Western Australian Stolen Wages Reparations Scheme, one of the things that people who wanted to apply needed to provide was identification. And I remember one particular client who, when I said these are the kinds of identification, she immediately produced her citizenship papers. She was an Aboriginal person and she had citizenship papers from maybe the 60s, which were like a passport, and she was still using that actually as her identification. Yes. So that might be a segue to you, Asmi.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Asmi Wood. I'm a Torres Strait man from the Western Torres Straits, from the Western Torres Straits Creole group. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on Ngunnawal land, the land which the ancestors of the Ngunnawal people have cared for tens of thousands of years, and we're sitting and meeting in a place which was sacred to them in terms of learning, and we are privileged to continue that learning experience. I would like to acknowledge Auntie Anne, who is our Indigenous elder on campus. Auntie Ruth, welcome to our I'm not sure, welcome to our warm-hearted welcome. It's a cold place, but I'm not welcoming you to land, as you understand, but you're welcome to our law school. I'd like to acknowledge the Vice-chancellor, our Dean, who has been a tremendous supporter of Aboriginal things for a long, long time, not just sitting there today, and our colleagues who have also been really supportive. As you heard, Anthony teaches Indigenous people and the law with me and others. I'd like to acknowledge other Indigenous people here in the room. I'd like to acknowledge our students, Indigenous and non-Indigenous both, and my teachers, our KCLS visitors, and also like to acknowledge Judy. I think the energy this woman produces, you can run a small city on what she generates. Partnerships are really important. Partnerships are part of the core vocabulary of many Indigenous people. But partnerships take two hands. As the Chinese say, you need two hands to clap. And while we are here in a very privileged law school where we learn the Western law, for many Aboriginal people, this Western law has also been the tool of our oppression. The English language was used to take away our languages. The English law was used, or the Anglo-Australian English common law was used to take away our laws. And sometimes it's with mixed feelings that we engage with Anglo-Australian law. It's with mixed feelings that we teach Anglo-Australian law, and we understand how confronting it can be, as it is for many young Aboriginal people coming into a law school to hear that law only existed 200 years ago, and you think, wow, I wonder what our ancestors were doing, you know, how they survived without law. And this is very confronting. But reconciliation and partnerships is about people getting to know each other, and programs such as this are absolutely fantastic for our students. It's fantastic for the people who receive the legal support that our amazing students can provide. But it is also about deepening those relationships and understanding between peoples, which is what reconciliation is about. It's very hard to be reconciled when you don't know who the other party is. And this ties in, as Senator Dodson said, to the issue of recognition. And recognition is about knowing people. And we hope that for our students who engage with our mob in the Kimberleys or wherever else here on Ngunnawal land, or the many Aboriginal people who come to the ANU and who make their home at Jabal, and I'm sure Auntie Anne would welcome you. The NCIS is another home where, you know, there are many Aboriginal people and where Aboriginal learning occurs. And to use the opportunities both here and in other places where we have created links to deepen your own understanding. Many Aboriginal people say that we have taken the effort to learn your language, to learn your law, to be in your places and to understand you. But we would like some recognition of who we are, you know, some understanding of who we are, and these opportunities that are created. I mean, of course, this doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it is fantastic that law schools such as ours and people, you know, in our law schools create these opportunities for our students. But for those who are not engaged with these programs, to try and engage with, not just from the view of helping the people in the Kimberley, which is fantastic and which we would like you to do, but also from your own perspective of deepening your own knowledge of Aboriginal people, so that we can truly be reconciled in terms of reconciling by knowing each other rather than a symbolic word that is empty of content. Our law school, as Kim said, has been in this process of reconciliation for a long time. We've had a support program that has worked with Jabal. We've had over 50 law graduates, Aboriginal law graduates through our law school. And I'm very, very grateful for all the support that my colleagues have given those who have worked with this program. It is not something that people can do on their own. It's something that we do as a collective, and it is important to recognize that collective. I also like to acknowledge that our new Vice-chancellor has made social justice a core part of ANU business. So we are no longer an addendum to, you know, people who speak other languages plus, you know, another equity group to which we are tagged on to. This is no longer the way the ANU is meant to look at Indigenous issues. The executive of the university has made Aboriginal issues core business, and I think elevating it to that position helps that process of reconciliation. We understand that there are other groups that need help, and we are not diminishing their disability or their needs, but, you know, I'm here to speak about Aboriginal issues, so I will highlight that, but this is not to diminish other people's issues. But being core business is an important part of where we can get to, and hopefully the resources that come with it to help to promote this. So I think one of the ideas is that we would have Indigenous academics in every faculty, every college in the ANU, and that our programs will incorporate Indigenous knowledges and Indigenous content throughout the university. The law school has begun this process, as you would know. It was started by Anthony over there and continued by Kim and others, to include knowledge of what Indigenous people mean to the broader community, and what our knowledges and our languages and our cultures mean to the fabric of the broader community, not just the law. it's not all positive. I mean, there are many issues that Aboriginal people face all over the country. It's not always easy. There are difficulties, as I've spoken about the difficulties of our students. We also see, even though that it's 10 years after the endorsement of the passing by the General Assembly of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, that this instrument, this international legal instrument, does not have a place in our law as such. People say, well, it's a declaration, it's not binding, but I would like to remind you that the Indigenous people who put the declaration together, even though they took the option of using the declaration as a vehicle to promote the rights of people, that they were very clear that the rights and obligations that in here or that are codified in that instrument were part of customary international law and therefore should by right be effective as law within our society. We know that we are a dualistic society, but nonetheless it must have not just moral impact but should have legal impact on our community as well. I hope, in conclusion, I could say that I would like to thank our students for being part of this program of creating and improving access to justice. We would like justice to be available to all people depending on need rather than the colour of their skin or the place of their birth or their parentage. And this is the ethic that is promoted at this law school, and this is a broad law school. We have both our undergraduate programs and our GDLP programs, which are really open to more people of Aboriginal heritage than is the undergraduate program. So I'm very grateful for that part of our law school, where many Aboriginal people around the country can get an experience of being an ANU student, an ANU scholar, and to get the support and the resources, and to walk away into their communities saying that we have been part of this fabulous university. I would like to thank everybody. I would like to thank people who are doing a lot for our communities, and to encourage you to do that and to work in partnership with us and to get to know each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Asmi. I might just comment that we actually have a large number of students away from the ANU in distant parts of Australia, not just metropolitan areas, but also regional, rural and remote areas, and also overseas. Some of those students are studying the Graduate Diploma of Legal Practice. Some of them are undertaking the Masters of Legal Practice. And I think Ferguson is here somewhere from Ernabella. Hello. Very nice to meet you. I'm teaching a master's course at the moment about law, lawyers, justice, regional, rural and remote, and Ferg is one of the students from Ernabella. So our next speaker is Janet Hunt, who's the Deputy Director of CAPA, who's got quite a background in relation to economic policy research, Kimberley, and broader Indigenous issues.
Well, thank you very much, Judy, for the opportunity to say a few words about this really exciting initiative. I'm looking at the panel, I realise I'm the only non-lawyer or non-law or lawmaker here, so I feel a bit nervous. But before I begin, I'd like to pay my respects as well to the traditional owners of this country on which I live and work every day, and also the traditional owners of the region we're talking about, the Kimberley. Particularly Ruth Abdallah, thank you very much, and also Senator Dodson, and other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here tonight, and particularly Auntie Anne, who is great leadership in this university for all the Aboriginal students. So thank you all. We've heard a lot lately about an Aboriginal voice to Parliament. Senator Dodson mentioned it earlier. But what I want to talk about, how voices can be strengthened right now with the support of these ANU law students, and I congratulate you all very much I hope that the Kimberley Community Legal Service will have greater capacity to strengthen the voices of Kimberley Aboriginal people on so many of the matters that are affecting them every day right now. This capacity building is always a two-way process. So whilst you are building capacity for the Kimberley Legal Service to strengthen Aboriginal voices, you are also learning a great deal, and that point's been made here today. But it's a very important point, I think, that it's always a two-way process. I had a look at a study that was done a decade ago of Indigenous community justice programs, and it found that the following were key to their success: self-determination in decision-making, programs that are culture and community specific, an emphasis on social justice and equity, involvement of Indigenous people in the design, delivery and evaluation of the programs, and the empowerment of local communities to identify their own problems and develop appropriate responses. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, those principles should apply and can apply to any Indigenous programs. But unfortunately, Canberra and Perth are very far from these principles in the way that they operate. There's a significant distance, not just geographically, but culturally, socio-economically, and legally between Canberra and Perth and the Kimberley. But laws, policies and budget decisions made in those distant capitals can have devastating consequences for individuals, for families, for organisations, and they even threaten whole communities there. And the Kimberley Community Legal Service gives people voice in these situations where they often feel really powerless. And it tackles these structural injustices, giving voice about policies and decisions that are being made about people in the Kimberley, but without people in the Kimberley. And its advocacy work on issues like the current welfare reform policies that are disciplining and further impoverishing already very poor people. The challenging these tokenistic schemes to supposedly redress past state abuse of Aboriginal people, people in care, people in children's homes. Or its contributions to these inquests on the devastating youth suicides in the Kimberley. These are all extremely important roles that this service is playing, and that I hope our students are able to support them on. And there'll be many more in the future. And as Senator Dodson and as me have mentioned on this 10th anniversary of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which Australia has endorsed, let's not forget, it calls on states to obtain the free, prior and informed consent of Indigenous people before adopting legal or administrative measures that would affect them. Well, we are a far cry from that in this country. Compared with countries like New Zealand, the US and Canada, laws and policies here are not based on any comprehensive legal framework or treaty that enshrines rights for First Peoples or gives them significant levels of decision-making and control. Experience overseas, and my colleague Di Smith is here today, she knows a great deal about this, emphasises the need for strong Indigenous governance capacity to enable Aboriginal people to work in partnership with governments to find the solutions to their challenges. Recent developments from the Uluru Dialogue we hope will lead to a framework for negotiations about a treaty or treaties with First Nations, including, of course, in the Kimberley. And that will change, we hope, that will start to change this situation. Aboriginal people will obviously need to determine the regional governance arrangements they want to enter into to conduct these negotiations. And there are many opportunities, but there will also be huge challenges ahead. If ANU students can help Kimberley Community Legal Service give greater voice to their people so they can really have a say about decisions made in remote capitals that affect them every day, this will be a very powerful thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. I just have to interpose again that I suppose all academics are really students. We're all continuous learners, of course, but there's also academics that are putting themselves, I suppose, to the service of the cause. So I think somebody a bit later might speak about that. So I hope you're getting a sense of a multi-layered initiative. So this is about how can a law school help to make a difference, and I think that's what Sarush is about to speak about.
It's kind of hard going last on a panel, particularly one which started with Senator Dodson. So on a more serious note, I understand tonight there's a vigil in Canberra that we can't attend for the young Aboriginal boy in Kalgoorlie who passed away in August 2016. A white Kalgoorlie man who admitted to running him over. There was a trial and the jury at the Supreme Court in Perth took 6.5 hours to clear the 56-year-old man, whose identity is suppressed by the court of manslaughter. They found him guilty of the alternative charge of dangerous driving causing death, which he admitted to, and he was then subsequently sentenced to 3 years imprisonment. So the issues we speak about tonight go to the heart of injustice and structural oppression which exists in real, in absurd and everyday ways for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. And it's absolutely the case that the non-Indigenous community is implicated in this. So tonight's event is in solidarity with the protests. I'd also like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the country we're on, the Ngunnawal, and also the country in which our offices are based in, the Yaru and the Mirrawong. The partnership with the ANU is based on one very simple premise. It really seeks to recalibrate traditional challenges between the centre and the periphery. How many times have you heard, and this is across the nation, people speak about decision-making in Canberra, speak about decision-making in Perth. For us, people speak about decision-making in Kununurra, or it could be by Centrelink, by the department, whoever the department is, by lawyers, by decision-makers, by the government. Aboriginal people, remote communities and small organisations in regional areas sit on the peripheries of power, of formal power we should say, and they struggle to be heard in the centre. But there are ways to invert this narrative by shifting perspectives. For example, this came to me when I was in Balgo. For a Kukuja woman who is a KCLS client, there's nothing remote about where she lives. Balgo is her here and now. The surrounding country is central to her experience of self, of culture, of language, of law, and of custodianship. It's white law, bureaucratic decision-making, and centralised service delivery. They don't exist at her centre, but on the peripheries of her daily lived experience. And even though those structures, they do impact on her daily life, those on her peripheries often fail to acknowledge her authority and her agency. And what happens in doing so is that they reduce the possibilities of justice. And while it's white law that has real impact on Aboriginal bodies, in actual fact, it's black law that protects the spirit and the soul. So what does it take for us to invert this narrative? What would it take for a few lawyers to realise that they aren't the experts for their clients' lived realities, that they need to be guided by their clients? What would it take for the Academy to realise that there are other worldviews that don't fit into neat empirics? Well, since launching the initiative, we've had about 50 students working in Canberra, in Kununurra, in Broome, working to the needs of our dingy offices in Kununurra and in Broome. We've had a handful of academics visit us, provide us training to improve our expertise, and come to our centre in the Kimberley. Those students and those academics, they work remotely for us. I've got a team of lawyers likewise who challenge the meaning behind the paper that they hold, the Bachelor of Laws, who seek to serve and understand that they aren't the experts, but our clients are. Our ontology in all of this is this. In the KCLS and ANU collaboration, it's the Kimberley region and the needs of our Aboriginal clients that are the centre. Through the launch of our initiative, we want to help bring attention and support to our region and inspire a different way of seeing how we can make things better. So let me give you a real example of a difference that's made for us to date. Right now we're working on a youth inquest looking at Kimberley deaths, 13 Kimberley deaths in the Kimberley. And we're involved in that. We're acting as counsel for 9 of those families. We've had a range of probably about 20 students based in Canberra who have helped in preparing chronologies, in making submissions. So, you know, they're all doing final year, or they're preparing essays which will go into our final submissions. We've given them instructions. We've had court sittings where I've emailed some students and I'd said, I need this right now. And they've gotten those things for us. They've sat in court sittings in Kununurra and Broome, and they've gone off on a whim, attending to a range of different tasks. We've had one student based in Broome who's been integral to providing one of the most important pieces of evidence in the inquest. So a range of young people speaking on video to what mental health and youth suicide means to them. Now, if those voices, that student enabled those voices to be heard, and if those voices hadn't been heard, the process would have been a complete shambles. So, I mean, that's a real and tangible difference that this partnership has made. Now, I'd just like to say a few final words about the significance of language in this context. At every stage through the inquest, there has been the challenges in and around language and culture. The court's spoken about interpreters to us just recently, but it's months after the process has commenced. The court have asked my clients if they require an interpreter, but again, thinking about this centre and periphery dynamic, in hearing the evidence, what's clear to me is it's not our clients. By and large, most of our clients speak Aboriginal English, they speak English, or they speak Creole. It's not our clients that require the interpreter. It's the court. And why is it that the onus gets put on the client to say, I need an interpreter? Why isn't the judge or the coroner sitting there asking or presuming that she's going to understand everything? So why don't we, in this dynamic, why don't we presume it's the system that needs to understand things better? In the context of legal services and justice in the Kimberley, English language is a symbol and a barrier to justice in many people's daily lives. Many of our clients are eloquent in their own Aboriginal language, and sometimes 2 or 3 others, but for whom English is on their periphery. Low English proficiency and a chronic lack of interpreters and translators are factors that push Aboriginal people in the Kimberley into tangles with bureaucracies, into debts, into court, and ultimately into prison. When outsiders design systems, imagining themselves replicated in the lives of others, such as in the lives of Aboriginal people in the communities in the Kimberley, those are some of the consequences. So I suppose my message for today is that we are agents in this dynamic. We have a role in inverting the paradigm, in realising that we aren't the experts, to get out of the way and accept to be led by real experts, to be of service so that we can be the kinds of people that client in Balgo, that our traditional owners in Australia would want to have at our periphery. At their periphery, I'm sorry, but thank you.
Bravo, Suresh, bravo. We're now going to let these people move away from this location so that they can go back to their seats, because in the next segment, there are a few people who are going to speak for 2 minutes, and I'm going to hand the microphone to each of them. So I'm going to also give you the opportunity to kind of stand up, so I know that this is a bit intense. And I'd like Karina and Fiona, if you could please come down the front, so you're up the back there at the moment, if you could come down the front. So we're going to have a moment of